We've got over 100 countries that are represented as guests this morning. We're super fired up. So a couple things happened since our last episode. One is, Gary, you just sold Empathy Wines.
That is true, Andrea.
What happened?
Hey, everybody, good morning. What happened was Constellation Brands came to the plate with an offer that John, Nate, and I thought was appropriate. And so, yes, 18 months ago, we started a direct-to-consumer brand called Empathy Wines. I know a lot of you supported that, so I want to thank you. And we transacted a couple weeks ago with Constellation Brands, the biggest wine company in the world. And it's super exciting, and we're excited to expand Empathy's scale and quality in our mission to make the best $20 wine in the world. And we're excited to kind of use our DNA and our skill sets that we've created to impact some of the biggest wines in the world, like Simi and Robert Mondavi and such. So pretty exciting. Not really in the business of selling businesses, but once in a blue moon, it happens.
Super exciting. So one other quick thing, we grabbed a co-host for you today, Gary. So we've got Roy Wood Jr. that's going to be joining our conversations. Just a couple quick things before we jump in with Roy. A few reminders. All of our episodes are recorded, so you can check them out on VaynerX.com. We hope all of you can continue the conversation. Keep it going on #MarketingForTheNow. And if you have anything you want to share with us, ideas, questions, hit us up, marketingforthenow at VaynerX.com. So we want to welcome Roy Wood Jr. Roy, oh my goodness, we're so excited to have you. Roy is a comedian, a correspondent on The Daily Show, an actor, producer, and the list goes on. He's been noted as the top 10 comics to watch and has been on a bunch of Comedy Central series, This Is Not Happening, Father Figure, and Roy Wood Jr., No One Loves You. Both some of the highest ratings on the network. We're so excited to have you join us, Roy. Thanks for coming.
Good morning, and thank you all for giving me a reason to close the door on my child. I appreciate this.
That is always a huge opportunity during these times, Roy.
Yeah, I mean, you know, what are we, month 40 of quarantine right now? He's 4, he can figure it out. He can reach most of the snacks and juices.
I totally agree. These kids are much more intuitive to this than people realize. We just got to set them outside and play.
Growing up fast, man. But thank you for having me, man. Happy to be in the mix with you today and meet some of these cool speakers.
Thank you so much, Roy. So let's get right into what I think you do as well as anybody in the world, which is why we're so happy to have you here. From a content creation standpoint, from a creative standpoint, how do you personally as a human, like, think about that? How did you come, you know, what kind of process, even at a child, back to being 4, did you have comedy around the house? Did it come natural? Were you distracting teachers in 3rd grade? Like, what was your early process and what has become your professional process?
Comedy was escapism for me. I wasn't in the same school system for more than 2 years until high school. So It was the constant reacclimation to the social scenes and circles of people around Birmingham. And like, I would take the radio. My father was in journalism, and so I would follow him to speaking engagements and stuff like that. And you know, he was a lot more woke than me in terms of his content and what he spoke for and what he fought for. But the oration part of it, I'm sure I got from him. I'd say the first big delve was in the 6th grade. I decided to make my own comic book. I was obsessed with comic strips. We read the newspaper as a family every Sunday morning. That was our thing. We sit the paper down and pull it apart like a turkey, and everybody would read a different section. And so, you know, I was into Marmaduke and Garfield and Calvin and Hobbes, the whole run. And I drew my own comic book, and then I would charge students 50 cents to read it. And then you had to bring it back. It was like a one comic book blockbuster. And I think that was my first hustle. The concept of a copy machine and a stapler just didn't.
You missed it.
I was like, no, this is the only one. You have to give it back on Thursday because I'm getting ice cream money from Terrence.
Roy, on the record, who tried to not bring it back on time in the history of this business? Anybody?
There was a guy, Trey McClure. We're friends now, so I can call him out by his full name. He held on to Mr. Goose a little longer than he should. Didn't pay any late fees. It's all love, Trey. I know this is going to get back to you because Alabama likes to gossip. So for me, that was kind of where, you know, being funny started, and high school was really where things started moving. I got cut from my high school baseball team my freshman year, but I wanted to learn and see, well, if I suck, what are they doing right? So I volunteered to be the bat boy, equipment manager, whatever you want to call it. And I just trailed the varsity kids around for a whole season. And they did the food fundraisers where you sell the chips to raise money to pay for the uniform. And I outsold everyone in the school.
Interesting.
And so that was when you start noticing how you need to build relationships. And sometimes it's not what you're selling, it's who you are. The product becomes secondary to a greater degree. There's a gentleman that my father worked for named A.G. Gaston, who was one of the first Black millionaires. And A.G. Gaston had a mantra. It was called "Find a Need and Fulfill it." And so that always stuck with me. And to bring you to the present, comedically and where content creation is concerned, for me, it's always been about seeing, all right, what isn't out there? And is there a way to make that feel like something that's already happening now? I sold a project to Comedy Central that we ended up shooting a pilot for. It was still in development. And it's about a probation officer. And it's about a probation officer and his relationship with his client. And to kind of show a different side of what law enforcement is. Probation is law enforcement. It's closer to social work on the spectrum of, you know, kicking ass, but it is law enforcement. And when you really boil the show down to a lot of degrees, there's a procedural element to it. But so it feels like something you've seen before, but it's about a world that you know absolutely nothing about. And I think there's a value in being unique. And for me, that came, I got turned, I guess when I think about it now, all of my best moments came from when I was rejected. BET passed on me for Comic View for 1 year in 2002. So much like baseball, okay, y'all didn't pick me. Who did you pick? Let's see what they did. And I sat for an entire season and watched Comic View. It's like 40 episodes, 6 comics an episode. And I just cataloged every topic that was breached on the show.
Interesting.
And I just kept a list of how many comedians talked about this, 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 and this. And by the end of the year, I had a spreadsheet of every topic that most Black comics nationally were discussing. And I just went, okay, cool. I won't do any jokes about that. So let's just start there and see if we can do something that hasn't been heard before. And off that alone, that should get me a look. It doesn't mean that my joke is going to be the funniest, but it will be the most different. And if I can at least have that advantage over you when it comes time to pick tapes, then I think that's something worth exploiting. And so that's what I've always tried to do.
It's interesting you bring that up, because for me, and I talk a lot, I produce so much content, but so much of my strength and so much of what I attribute the good things that have happened to me is about listening. And the story you just told is a really strong listening story. The baseball story was a strong listening story. Do you feel like observation and listening is foundational for you?
Yeah, I think that's more important than execution, because you got to know where to shoot. You got to know where to aim the gun before you shoot.
It's the insight. It's a strategy.
Yeah, it's a sniper. You're sitting for hours and hours taking in information and deciding when is the exact proper moment, you know, to mount your attack. And so for me, it's definitely about listening. It's definitely about assessing the marketplace, seeing what's being sold and seeing what's getting on. And then also trying to, you know, pull a Wayne Gretzky and be ahead of the puck, which is why COVID is so interesting to me, you know, in terms of comedy creation and content creation as a whole, because not only do you have a pandemic where people are in pain and people are going to be hurting, and regardless if a vaccine came tomorrow, there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be dealing with a lot of physical hurt, a lot of emotional hurt. I lost an aunt in February, so I can't imagine what other people are going through. So where there's pain, there's laughter, there's an opportunity for a laugh, but you don't know how long. And then on top of that, you have an election coming on the backside of this. And if you think that elections don't affect the type of content that ends up on television, you're wrong. So it's about looking and figuring out, okay, what can you pitch or what can you create today that's going to still have an impact no matter who wins in November and no matter what people are going through. You know, the thing that's interesting now about comedy, Chris Rock said, and I'm paraphrasing him, but he basically said, everything that I do is to convince people to come see me live. Everything in his portfolio was about getting you to pay the $50 or whatever. He's not $50, he's probably like $100 now, but to come see me live. This is what, come see this movie, watch this TV show, whatever. Well, the come see me live element isn't really there right now for comedians, and you don't know when that's going to come back. So you have to do things that maintain relevance so that when people are ready to go back out and when people have enough money on a regular basis to go back out, you know, because I'm not going to sit here and act like what I do is similar to the other people we're going to talk to today. You know, what I do is a disposable income activity that can hopefully alleviate a little bit of, I'm no different than a sip of wine. For me,
that's right.
You know
It's 100% escapism. It's
Correct.
100%.
So, you know, I think when people get back on their feet and the unemployment dries up, the first thing you aren't thinking about is coming to see some jokes from me inside of a Corona hut, which is what a comedy club is, as far as the low ceiling, everybody's together. That's a hut. That's a Corona hut. And, you know, so it'll be a while. So it's about figuring out content and ways to do things that keep you relevant and keep you
on that note, because for everybody who's joining in, #marketing for the now, please tell us what you're thinking about this interview with Roy. These are about 15-minute blasts. So before I lose you, Roy, talk to me about the Call-In digital show, because I think as I'm listening to you, it makes a whole lot of sense why you're leaning in that direction.
Well, because I feel like without getting into too much detail about it, I feel like it's an opportunity to unite people. And I see what's happening with a lot of the Zoom shows now. Like if you peep the game from the beginning of quarantine, where you had a surge in people becoming content creators. So there's fewer consumers of content. You know, everybody's grabbing a microphone. I've gone to the camera stores in New York, and every time I try to get a camera component, it's sold out, or there's a 2-week back order because everybody's buying the same stuff now. I think that we are all one. And so I did morning radio for 10 years, and the best part of morning radio was talking to the streets. And I think that's the most interactive way, you know, to go about doing things. And radio was a place where I was able to really build a lot of relationships because I did prank phone calls. And so with the prank calls, I took prank phone calls, and this is pre-YouTube. This is 02, 03. So the only way you went viral was over an email, where someone would send you an email and say, download this. And you would just download random stuff to your laptop. And that's kind of how I was able to kind of grow my comedy a little bit. And so through that, what I learned was that it's laughs that connect people. So if we can all laugh together, then I think there's something collective about that. And so when I look at the marketplace and when I find a need to fulfill, I think that the sense of collective conversation comedically, most comedy conversations are observational. They're voyeuristic. Hey, watch me talk to this person versus, hey, let's talk. And I think that's the cool thing about Instagram Live is that, you know, people have a direct line. I think there's a way to kind of set that up a little bit more, you know, more formally. Real quick,
please.
The prank call thing. What we did, because I was having trouble breaking into prank phone calls in other markets, and it just goes back to finding a need and fulfilling it. I was having trouble breaking into comedy clubs in certain markets because I didn't have a television credit. But I peeped that most comedy clubs value comedians that have media reach. And so the thing I knew about radio at the time is that most radio in smaller AA, AAA baseball cities, Omaha, Syracuse's, Columbia, Missouri's of the world, they're carrying jocks in the afternoon or in the morning that are by themselves, or it's a 2-person show, so they don't have a lot of content. We're only playing the prank calls in Birmingham. They're not, and then they go in a vault forever. So I would contact DJs in cities where I wasn't getting booked at the comedy club and mail them the prank phone calls for free and just say, play them and say my name. I don't care what you do with them after that. They're yours forever. And they would play them. I'd let that marinate for 3 months. Then I would call the comedy club and say, hey, I'm on the radio in your city every week. You should probably book me at your club. And that's how I was able to expand my reach comedically and able to leverage those fans. The one mistake I made was not having a email lists.
You didn't have the
Bro,
data.
do you understand the data I would have had if I'd have just been collecting emails since '02?
Yes, Roy, I do. That's what I do for a living.
That's the one thing
So
I wish I
do
had
understand.
back.
No, but honestly, I think the one thing that, that's fine, but I say this a lot to my team. A lot of people value data very highly, and the world does, and I do, but actual attention and brand really, really gets underestimated. And the part, I was listening very intently, say my name and say it right, and that's it, was exactly the punchline of why you're sitting here today. And I'm really thrilled to be co-hosting this day with you, and I appreciate you, and thanks for getting up early.
Man, thank you, man. Well, you ready to get it started? We ready to meet some of these people?
I'm unbelievably ready. Let's go.
All right, let's crank it up. All right, our first guest today is Sandeep Seth. Sandeep currently serves as the CEO of SK2, a prestige beauty business where he heads local, regional, and global organizations. SK2 is in over 10 countries across many countries with a diverse, multifunctional team. Let's welcome Sandeep to Marketing for the Now.
Hi, Roy. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sandeep, how are you?
Very good, Gary. How are you doing? Thank you very much for today.
It's great to see you. So Sandeep and I get to interact because our VaynerMedia in Singapore gets to work very closely with this fine gentleman. So Sandeep, let's get right into it. Obviously, your part of the world felt the impact of the coronavirus earlier than we did here in the States and other parts of the world. What was, and it happened right away. It was like New Year, boom. How did that thought process go in your mind as such an important global leader? Was it obvious that it was going to be this serious? I remember the first, I'm glad I wasn't, I do pretty well with predictions, but luckily I was smart enough not to make any prediction videos because I was like, man, worst case, this is March, worst case, if everything goes wrong, we'll be back on 4th of July. I might just have to change that to 2021, and so, did you know it was going to be like this? Was the news there a little bit more like, hey, this is real? Obviously the region has felt with SARS and other things in the past a little bit more than the Americas have. And then after that answer, how did you then adjust and what's been the outcome?
Yeah, Gary, over the last 10, 15 years, we've seen lots of big crises out here, and we always prepare for that. In fact, on SK2, I'm known as the chief chaos officer, always creating chaos for everyone. And we thought we were going to be ready for this, and when we first heard the news, but I've got to be very honest, nothing could have prepared us for what we've kind of seen over the last few months. And I would say broadly, we looked at our response in 3 phases, I would say. Phase 1, what we call reaction, was very primal. It was really, really about managing the unpredictability and safety of everyone. I would say first 4 to 6 weeks was really making sure, accounting for everyone. We've got over 5,000 beauty consultants who are out in the field. We've got a couple of thousand people across our plants and different sites on there. We had to also really understand each and every one of them. And then I'll use one of your words, empathy was critical there, because even safety meant many different things for each individual. How people react to this situation was very, very different. And as leaders, it was important for us to be available and kind of understand what individual needs was. And I would say first 4 to 6 weeks was all about accounting for everyone and making sure everyone is safe. And I would say phase 2 was responding to the communities. It's our responsibility as one of the leading brands to see how do we respond. And just to give you a couple of examples on what we did, one of them was we immediately jumped in China, which was of course the most affected and the first market there in terms of our donations through China Women's Development Fund, providing the medical supplies and other things that they were needing. And then we pivoted our supply chain and our plant, and we started manufacturing masks, because that was critical in terms of how can we provide free masks to all our employees, but also outside to our partners and everything, and we did that. And I think stage 3, which is what we're going through, is what we call re-emerge. How do we re-emerge stronger out of this crisis? And one of the things we always talk, when you're in crisis, when you're in chaos, the most important thing is stick to your identity. And for us, I would say there are 2 things: our brand's purpose, which is change destiny. It's really about how do we inspire the world in these situations. And we worked with your team on launching the campaign with Japanese swimmer Ike Rikako. I don't know if you know about her, but she is one of the top Olympians from Japan, but she was diagnosed with leukemia over the last 18 months. And now she's at the stage where she's recovered. So bringing her story to everyone was really, very positive angle for us from a Change Destiny point of view, providing inspiration and hope, especially during this period. But the other part of our identity is really consumer obsession, truly trying to understand what is changing. And it's changing so massively, Gary, just to kind of tell you. It's very obvious to say everyone's going online, but then how do you do physical counseling? Like skincare is a very physical touch feel thing. Like how do you kind of work in that environment? And I think we had to significantly pivot on that. Some of the examples I can talk about, how do we move from counseling in a department store to e-counseling, right? Having our beauty consultants live online, which is not an easy shift for all of them, right? No. We were experimenting with some of the, human AI like chatbots, which now becomes a reality. So we've gone live in the US with that, and we're trying to go live in other markets. And we've also luckily been working on what we call Future X. This is a project that we are working on transforming the department store physical environment using technologies like, facial recognition, eye tracking and everything. And it was the right time for us to now jump into that and bring this to life, because even when people go out, they're looking for contactless kind of an experience. So how do you do that without a physical contact or getting close to anyone? We kind of coined it as phygital, bringing physical and digital together and kind of bring it there. So I think through these three phases, we are trying to kind of cope with what I would say in my 20 years plus working here, one of the biggest crises that we've seen. And as you just mentioned, it's impossible to predict when this is going to be over, to be honest, right?
Before I hand it, I apologize, Sandeep. Before I hand it to Roy for a question, because I was so excited about this part, SK2 was an official sponsor of the Tokyo Olympics. A lot of money, a lot of work goes into something like that. I can't imagine how much planning was happening over the last 24 months. How do you pivot with something like that? Like what's the update there?
Yeah, that was massive. I mean, look, you know it very well. 2020 was year of Olympics. I mean, being a brand from Japan and Olympics being in Tokyo was the biggest thing. We were like the acting hosts for this Olympics, and we had put our entire year's budget behind that. Now, here's the good news. We are fully committed to Olympics, and we are fully behind all our athletes, and in fact, going beyond that to support all of them. So nothing changes from that front. Having said that, we had to completely pivot our plans. Gary, you're aware, our campaign that we were putting together was the first of its kind, 6-episode manga series under the big idea of beauty is no competition. And we had actually done a pre-launch on 3rd of March in New York at Times Square. We'd taken over Times Square. And
I remember. To think about you and I hanging out in Times Square at that scale.
Yes.
And for the world to be completely different 2 weeks later, it's unbelievable to think about.
Absolutely, absolutely. I returned back from the US on the 10th of March, and I didn't leave home after that for like 4 months, like working from home. So that was a massive pivot for us. But luckily, as I kind of mentioned earlier, we had a 7th athlete, Ike Rikako, whom we were working with. She was going through leukemia at that stage. And we realized beauty is no competition is not that contextual and relevant when people are going through such a big human crisis at this point. And here's the great news. We heard that Ike Rikako fully recovered from her leukemia, and her doctors allowed her to get back to the pool and start now practicing for the Olympics. Now, the sad part is it's pushed out by a year, but it's great. Now she gets a chance probably to go back there. And so we moved away from, beauty is no competition to really talk about the human story of this person to bring back hope. And this was, our Japanese consumers responded very, very positively to that. The world is looking for some positive news at this point. And as brands, we could be that force for good to kind of bring this together. So we had to massively pivot both in terms of our campaign, but also how we sell in this period, right? Where people's mind is, in so many different places, we still need to run the business. And there was a massive pivot, which again, we're working with your team and the others together to see how we move from just pushing and selling our products to serving them in a way that creates a bit of empathy towards the brand and the situation, and really makes the brand creates that connection between the brand and our consumers. So this has been a massive pivot, but I would say we are fully behind the Olympics, and we are fully behind the athletes, and looking forward to how we really make this campaign come to life in a slightly different way, in a slightly different tone, because I don't think the world is ready and receptive for the things that we had planned earlier.
Understood. Roy, any final questions for our friend here?
Sandeep, Seth, Global CEO, SK2. To that point with Japan, as a global company, how much of this pivot do you believe is temporary versus going to be permanent, in the sense of being able to, the buying habits globally of different, the buying habits of consumers are going to be different from country to country. So the messaging already has to be different in a non-COVID atmosphere. Post-COVID, we know that the retail structure is going to change in a lot of countries. We know that the buying habits, just because the stores are open doesn't mean every consumer is going to be comfortable coming back to the store. So do you see your company pivoting into some sort of hybrid model in a permanent capacity, or is everything you're doing right now just in the temporary as you feel things out month to month?
Look, it's always difficult to predict where things will go, but where I stand is I think there are going to be some really big and permanent changes on how we live our lives, to be honest, and that's going to impact retail. That's going to impact how people shop. You're rightly saying, I mean, today when shoppers are going to the store, they're all wearing a mask, right? And no one wants to take the mask off. Our beauty consultants are wearing a shield, right? And in fact, in some places, there's a glass barrier between them. So suddenly the whole place has become a fortress, right? So how do you interact in that situation where you're doing that? So even, you know, as things improve, I think this is a change that's going to be permanent. Probably it's going to be a good change where the adoption of technology is going to be much faster. I know there are a lot of memes as to, you know, who's creating the digital transformation today? Is it the CEO, CFO, or CTO? It's actually COVID that's creating probably the biggest digital transformation.
100%.
On you know how things are. So yeah, I'm expecting a lot of big changes to come, and I think brands that are going to be agile enough to learn fast, businesses that are going to show empathy to this, probably will be the one emerging strongest.
Sandeep, before we let you go, any consumer behavior shifts that you've had for yourself? Are you watching anything, listening to anything? Have you bought things online that you've never bought in the past, and now you're like, wait a minute, I should have been buying bananas online the whole time? Anything like that?
Actually, that's so true. I mean, look, we pretty much shifted to buying everything home. Like it started by ordering food, right? I mean, you know, you were getting bored cooking at home. So pretty much every meal was, you know, getting ordered from outside and restaurants that I'd never explored before. But you know, it's a big shift. I've just ordered some shoes from the US last week. So I think we are all getting comfortable in buying things without trying.
There's never a bad time to buy some off-whites. Never.
Yes.
That I'm on board.
You know that. I mean, I'm into those.
Roy, I think we got one more minute here. Anything else on your mind?
No, that's it. You know, we can talk offline about trying to get my girl some free product. You know, hey, man.
Absolutely, right. Any day for you.
I don't know if you noticed
you could take a boy from Birmingham, but you can't take the Birmingham out of the boy. I like that, Roy. I know what you did there. I appreciate it. Sandeep, thank you so much. Thank you for being a part of this, and thank you for that global perspective. We'll talk soon. Love you.
Thank you. Pleasure. Bye.
Right?
I'm just being silly. I gotta pay for it.
Strategic.
Yo, this next brother we're talking to, man, you don't like. I don't know if you've met Dr. Phillip Goff before. I don't know. He was the first person. My first week on the Daily Show, he was the first person I interviewed for a piece on police bias. Dr. Phillip Goff, he's the inaugural Franklin A. Thomas Professor in Policing Equity at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and the co-founder and CEO of the Center for Policing Equity. Dr. Goff is an expert in contemporary forms of racial bias and discrimination, as well as the intersections of race and gender. Dr. Goff serves as one of 4 principal investigators for CPE's National Justice Database, the first national database on racial disparities in police stops and use of force. Dr. Goff led the CPE in becoming one of 3 principal investigators for the U.S. Department of Justice's National Initiative for Building Community Trust and Justice. We're happy to learn and hear from Dr. Goff my dog today. Welcome to Marketing for the Now, Dr. Goff.
How you doing, my man?
Man, good to see you, first and foremost. And I know Gary's got a couple questions, but let me start, if you don't mind.
I don't.
Let's start with your job versus your side hustle. Because it seems like your side hustle ain't really a side. It's like your job, when your job and your side hustle are going neck and neck, which one is really the side hustle, Dr. Goff? So talk to us a little bit about what happens at John Jay, and then talk to us a little bit about what happens over at CPE.
Well, first I got a little bit of news on the John Jay gig. That John Jay gig as of today is no more.
I like the hands. It's like,
he's talking about Alabama, and like I'm from Philly, so like I just keep the Philly hustle together. This is so anyway, the John Jay gig is no more. I am so sad to say goodbye to my folks there, but I am now a full endowed professor at Yale University. So I needed to go up to New Haven because the pizza to upgrade. I need to level up on my pizza game. But so there is the jobby job, which is being a professor, and then there is the side hustle, which is being CEO of the Center for Policing Equity, and they are secretly the same gig. So the way that came about is that when you are an individual professor, you get respect, you publish papers, people are like, oh, this dude's legit. Like I talk like I'm from Philly, but my paper looks like I came from Harvard and Stanford because I did. And that's a good look. But there is no way I, as an individual, can do anything remotely on the scale of what's needed on race and policing as like Negro from Philadelphia. That is not going to cut it. So about 13, 14 years ago, somebody said, you need to institutionalize yourself. So I put something together on like a little trifold pamphlet. I brought it to a bunch of police chiefs. I was like, would you like my pamphlet? Would you like to know what I could do for you? I do math real good. I talk pretty. Could I help you out? And so that's where the Center for Policing Equity came from, a collaboration with a deputy chief in Denver who was like, I need someone to come in and do some real work out in the streets with some science. Don't be trying to sell your body. This is not going to sell for much. I need that science to come with a serious racial lens and with rigorous statistics. So the Center for Policing Equity is an outgrowth of the research that I do as a professor, but it allows me to do more than just publish in journals that like 3 people read. We can actually give our science directly back to communities and directly back to police chiefs so that they can hold themselves accountable to their values. And we're not used to talking about stats and values, but I mean, if we're going to be talking in a business context, if you measure what matters, in policing, we've always measured crime, but we haven't measured justice. We measure justice, we give that back to communities. And to do that at scale, I needed to have a side hustle.
Okay, so then from the marketing aspect of that, then you were able to, you almost in a way, you went to these police departments one by one and said, hey, I can help you be better at your job with this data. For that to work, the customer has to trust the data. So when we talk about policing in this climate now, with everything from Breonna Taylor to George Floyd, I don't have to tell you, you know all of the statistics with that. How do you convince a police department that now is a better time? Because I would imagine not every police department said yes to science or yes to the data. So what is the process in convincing people that this is something they need, that may show them that there's something wrong with it? It's almost the opposite of beauty, where something's going to show you and make you look prettier. Your data comes in and goes, no, here's where your pimples are.
I mean, they're not pimples so much as there are gaping, sucking chest wounds. But yeah, this is the general area. Like these aren't blemishes on the almost perfect skin of American democracy.
Doctor, when you're 14 in high school, a pimple feels like a gashing hole in your body.
I understand that, right? Which is why you're not supposed to like pluck at it and do whatever. But America's older than 14, and these wounds are a little bit deeper than that.
Yes,
so one of the first misconceptions I got to clear up for folks who hear about what I do, I'm like, oh, you're a black dude from Philly who studies racism, and then you work in police departments. You must be suing them all the time. So I got to tell you, growing up in Philly as I did, I never thought this would be my world. But police chiefs are climbing over themselves trying to get access to the services. We got a backlog of 250 plus departments that are just asking to get in.
Doctor, how many, you have a really interesting question on that, because this is what I've been thinking about probably the most out of the last 8 to 12 weeks? And this is just, I'd love to hear, and I can see how you roll, so I'm excited to get the answer. Of those 250, how many do you think are checking the box because it's optically right, versus how many do you feel are deep in it? And just, and I know it's a tougher, I'm just genuinely curious, and not that, and at some level, it's almost like political correctness, like checking the box. I don't even want to demonize that. I'm just genuinely curious, because I knew your answer was going to be they're climbing over themselves, because this is what I see in the business world right now. Mm-hmm. But what I'm curious about is that.
Yeah, and so we get like 3 categories of folks that come to holler at us, right? The first is like, yo, it's racism. I need some help. And those are those folks that you point at your heart. Those folks really believe. Those are my favorite chiefs to work with. And that is the majority of them. Like, yo, we got something, we got to do it right. Then we got some folks who are like, this mess. I know we're not racist. Everybody else is racist, not us. But what you're gonna do? You're gonna come in, and I'm so confident that I dare you to show me where I'm racist, right? And you know what? We can work just well with them too. I'm like, okay, so tell me all the ways you know you're not racist. They're like, well, we go where the crime goes. Check. All right, we're gonna look at that. Well, it's all poverty. Check. We're gonna look at that. It's like, well, the school systems are trash. I believe you. We're gonna look at that. And then when we do our analyses, what we're doing is we're not giving back to them like, oh, black people are 4 times more likely to get beat up in your city, which is true. But that is literally the correlation fallacy, right? You can't tell me how much of that is because of what police do as opposed to crime and poverty and schools and employment and healthcare, which all happens before any police stop. So what we give back is the portion of those disparities that belong to police. We give back to them their behaviors and their policies.
That's where the I'm good at math kicks in.
Yeah, that's where the math is what's up, right? So I give that back to them.
What's the third group?
But that third category is exactly what you're talking just about. They're like, oh, so they did that in the county over there. I guess we're going to do it too. So yeah, come on. Those are actually the ones where like, yeah, it's like, I know that you think that we're just off the shelf. We don't do like that. We bespoke, right? We Neiman Marcus, we in Walmart. Not that there's anything wrong with either of the business models, but we don't have capacity to do what because I tell you, 4 or 5 years ago, it used to take 3 PhD students. I used to chop off their eyelids, put them in a cage and be like, you clean data until you're done. 9 to 24 months later, they come out with 1 department's data cleaned.
Jeez.
So in 2016, when democracy ended, we got Google to come in and give us a bunch of engineers, and they built us some software. And that software, instead of going 9 to 24 months, we go 9 to 12 hours. Like we're inside of a day, and most departments we can do under 2 hours to clean their data, where it used to take us 1 year to 2 years. So now we're at the point where we can go to scale, and we can not only just give it back to, we're starting to clear out that backlog, we can now start to give back to folks at a cadence. So like they're not just getting it once every couple of years, they're getting it once every couple of months. Exactly. That's right. So you're measuring the change in addition to the baseline. That's the goal. Because if you really care about something, you don't just measure it once. You start doing it regularly and holding yourself accountable to it.
Okay, so then to that point, then what can business leaders learn from that? In the sense, is it harder to change systemic issues within your organization, or is it tougher to maintain a non-systemic environment? Is it easier to get well, or is it easier to stay healthy?
Yeah, and it's really going to depend on the market and the industry and the individual organization. But I'll tell you, like, there's an example from industry that we use all the time in Salesforce, right? So in Salesforce, they came through and someone was like, I think we might be paying women less than men. And Mark Benioff, with his infinite wisdom, was like, no way. But they decided they were going to measure it. And lo and behold, they were paying women less for doing the same job. Like, oh shit, well, we got to do this better. So they equalize pay. And then a woman comes back later, is like, hey, Mark, let's do this again a year later. He's like, no way, we definitely don't need to do that. We already fixed it. So they measured again a year later. And you know what? The same gap that came the year before was already back. Because in that year, they had acquired a bunch of companies that had the same gap that all of Silicon Valley has on gender disparity. So they're like, oh, you mean if we care about this, we got to measure it regularly and adjust to it regularly, like everything else that we care about?
You know what's funny about that? I talk to a lot of people in business about that. I'm like, you do look at your financial statement every month, right? Or when you try to get into another analogy, I'm like, you mean like that time you lost 20 pounds for your wedding, but then a year later it was all back +3? You know, like this thought of like, do it once and go to sleep because you did it is just, there is no, you know, to me, that's the tell that you're checking a box versus it's your actual truth. You know, I've been having a lot of conversations internally, externally. I'm an investor in 84 businesses, and the reality is I'm trying to get people to understand, like, however you think about anything, I'm not even imposing my own points of view on the world on you, but recognize there are things that you check on constantly. For example, I believe in, you know, the atmosphere, the energy, that general net happiness of my employees. So when I get a new admin, inevitably they're like, man, you spend a lot of time on one-to-one meetings with employees, you know, smart ones with a little courage. They're like, should HR do more of that? Or can we put more people in those meetings? And I'm like, no, this is what I think is actually the variable for the success of our business. Like I genuinely believe this 15 minutes with Tasha or Rick or Sally Pants McGee is an ROI positive thing in my actions. So I think it's very important, because I know a lot of business people are watching right now. You're not going to go 2 years not looking at your bank statement because you value it. So if you value anything, D&I, innovation, you know, I value innovation. My CFO gets mad at me all the time because I'm spending money on something new that will not return money this year, but that's because I value innovation, and that's not. And so if you value this issue, which I think is ROI business positive, by the way.
Yeah.
One of the things I try to do, Doctor, I don't know, you know, is like make it selfish to be selfless. This is actually good for your business. Forget about that. You're gonna have to talk to your grandkids about this one day and talk about what kind of human you are. Forget about that. This is just good for your business. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's 1,000%. The thing I want to do to be generous to folks is part of the reason that people don't sort of click on, well, what do the numbers look like, is because in general, across society, we've defined this problem as a hearts and minds thing, right? We've defined it as internal to individuals. And so if you don't have a defective heart and don't have a defective mind, you can't be racist and problem solve. So people put out statements, but they don't actually track behaviors. Let me be really clear. Over the last couple of months, you have not seen a single person in the streets being, what do we want? White people to feel differently about us. That has never happened once in the history of Black America, because it's about behaviors. And once you get that we're talking about race and equity, it's about behaviors. Like, oh, I measure behaviors all the damn time. So we can start by changing the definition, and then we go back to measuring behaviors. And once we're at measuring behaviors, businesses should know how to keep up with that, for sure.
So then what can businesses that are trying to police their own biases within their organization, what can they learn from your work? Like, what can they take away? Because I believe that in this climate now, businesses aren't just judged by their products, they judge on how much they care and have concern about their fellow man. So what can they learn from you?
So I think there's two sort of highline takeaways beyond the measure this stuff that matters and this stuff matters. One is work backwards from the problem. And I say, when I talk to corporates, a lot of times, like, they think that the problem is just numbers. I can tell you that there's a reason why the inclusion came after diversity, and we're gonna talk about justice and freedom later, because that's about power, right? Talk to the folks who are there in a space where they can actually say something, or bring somebody else in that they can say something to, so you can hear what the actual issues are within your organization. Work backwards from that, because those are the measurables that you want. But the other piece is exactly what you said, right? Policing right now has a whole bunch of problems. Public safety has a whole bunch of problems. Among them, though, is a brand problem, right? Who the heck trusts that police are going to show up and do the right thing for vulnerable folks? Like, who thinks that when you see a video of policing, that you're like, oh, something good's about to happen. A baby's about to get saved, right? A family on welfare is about to find employment and they're going to get the better education and come up. That's not what's happening. The brand is contaminated by the historical choices of the industry. That's not just policing, y'all. So if you care about the long-term future, you're going to invest in innovation, invest in the brand. And the brand has to be positively aligned with basic social values. That doesn't mean that you need to have police abolition as one of your core tenets for market success, but it does absolutely mean that you should show up in the anti-racist column. Like, that's a fairly basic element, that racism bad, Nazism bad, should be associated with your brand. And if it's not, you better look at what choices you made that got you there, because brands don't happen overnight.
Well,
that's right.
He is Dr. Phillip Goff, now a professor
Fantastic.
of Yale. Congratulations. And the Center for Policing Equity. Thank you, good sir, for coming on Marketing for the Now.
Always good talking to y'all.
Take care.
That brother's intense, man. When I tell you,
Smart.
He has a bias training simulator with paintballs, and it's kind of like, guess who's going to be the agitator? And I'll be honest in telling you, I made a few wrong guesses.
Listen,
it's tough work.
Right. Honestly, you know what's so funny about that little moment right there where you just said that? I've been thinking a ton about accountability, shame, just circumstances of how you grew up that were out of your control. I think there's so much that so many want in this country in advancements on this. And there's so many layers it's just so layered to how to get there. But it's, accountability and having the strength to say you're wrong, or I made this mistake, or I didn't know, or I don't know, or, very, very powerful. And I'm seeing a little momentum in it. And I really do think it's one of the pillars to the unlock, or at least the advancement. So I'm excited to hear that. So I appreciate your paintball story.
Absolutely. I try to be honest sometimes. Not all
sometimes.
The time, but sometimes.
Right. When it's convenient. When it's convenient.
Next up is Leslie Gillin. Leslie is the CEO of JPMorgan Chase & Company. She's described as an amazing marketing talent and an all-around great human. She has a deep P&L and marketing experience and has a highly respected people leader for the team. We are so happy to welcome Leslie and her insights. Leslie, welcome to Marketing for the Now. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Wow, who described me that way? I didn't describe me that way. I should describe me that way, but
we hit up your family for that. I don't know if I heard that. Like, I don't know if my audio went off. I thought I heard Roy say CEO, so I'm just gonna congratulate you on the massive promotion.
Thank you, Roy.
I thought I said CMO. Did I say CMO?
You might have. I'm telling you, it might have been my earpods, but I heard it that way, and I was like, man.
Has anybody told Jamie Dimon that yet? I don't know. I don't know.
But maybe you want to DM him. Anyway, Leslie, it's a real pleasure to have you here. How are you? How is the family? How are you hanging in with all this?
Everything's good. Everything's good. We're hanging. I actually so enjoyed Dr. Goff. I'm a Philly girl too, so I need to catch up with him. And I have a nephew who's a second-year student at Yale, so I definitely need to catch up with him.
You definitely need to, because you want to get the good grades, and I get all that. So
completely.
Let's get right into the question that I'm very fascinated about. From your point of view, one of the biggest brands in America. How do you pivot as soon as this hits? Like what, you're fairly new into the job,
Yeah, 3 months or 3 weeks in COVID hit for me. So.
Right. So that's going to be great war. Yeah. That's going to be great war stories for your grandchildren one day. Right. How did you kind of calibrate? And actually, this might be interesting, might help people in the future. When you're 3 weeks into something this big, how much do you balance your own confidence with actually having the humility to tap into others? That might be an interesting question, because I would probably struggle with that as like a confident guy and like want to show that I'm a good leader. With something so intense and at such scale as Chase, I'm trying to think about where I would lean into humility and where I would lean into my own intuition and confidence. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's a good one. And I think being a leader first and foremost is about listening more than anything, and making sure you're surrounding yourself with people who are actually better than you in many categories, to make sure like all boats rise with the tide, right? And I can't be the smartest on every level. Some of the promotions and such that I did recently with our chief media officer, et cetera. And so I think it's a lot about, when you think about JPMorgan Chase, we're 3 brands. We're, 10 CMOs across the corporation, plus a, marketing center of excellence. And my job is really just to listen and make sure I'm enabling them to do the job we need to do for our customers and clients, because they're closer to it. So I think it's all about listening, rolling up your sleeves, making sure you're part of the team and getting involved. And as my colleague, T. Duckett, who's the CEO of the consumer bank, says, get proximate. Get proximate with what's going on. And, at every level, every economic level, this is unprecedented stuff. And so our biggest job, number one, was listening, to our customers. And as what people say and what people do sometimes aren't the same thing, right? It's kind of like qual and quant, and some of the things that we do is But because of the speed of this unprecedented time, even looking at the data doesn't give you, there's no models that predicted going from 3.5% unemployment into high double digits in like, weeks, or stimulus programs, to the degree. And call centers, our inability to be able to, be there for the customer. And so we needed to make sure we were there in ways that we've never been to the degree we were before. So listening to our customers, one of the things that was super important was, social more than ever. Not just about a marketing channel and a servicing channel, it was really about getting proximate in real time. And so that was super important to us to figure out how we needed to pivot, what people were thinking. I mean, we were using everything from Google Analytics to Sprinkler to Signal to just making sure we had fingers on the pulse, obviously working closely with you guys who are the masters at it, just to make sure that we were really hearing, not just on the phones. We're also, because of the size and scale of JPMorgan Chase, over 50% of our 250,000 people were essential on the front lines in branches. I mean, we did our best to make sure that, 90% of our branches stayed open when they needed to, because people needed access to their money. And you can imagine the employees' concern, just like healthcare workers. I mean, they have families they have to go home to. Are we getting the plexiglass up as quickly as possible? We had drive-through only for periods of time. But so it's just, I think to your question on pivoting, one is just staying as proximate and close to customers as possible. Social was a huge ability for us to do that. Our employees were an amazing way to do that. And then it was really about how we operated. So, as a team, it was, at every level of the company, top down, we had daily, we were all agile. I mean, you talk about agile and, every company's getting there. Well, I think we all had to rip off that Band-Aid super quick. And so pivoting, in that way and making sure that we were focusing on the things that our customers were talking about in that moment, payment protection programs for small businesses, making sure that we can get loans to people so that they didn't close their businesses and can pay their people. It was all those types of things in the moment, and making sure that we were overnight delivering digital capabilities and technology that if you would have asked us, could you actually do that? The answer would have been, no way, are you kidding? We could never launch something digitally in 48 hours. Well, we did. So that's also an eyes wide open on the BS bureaucracy that we all tend to just get
process and meetings over actual actions.
Right? Yeah,
100%.
Exactly. And so, but it was total survival mode, and we were doing it on behalf of our customers and clients, and they were requiring it, and we needed to show up. So we really had no choice. And so we'll be better coming out of this. I think, the other thing, I really appreciated Dr. Goff and Roy, your conversation prior to this, because I think it's not just about making sure we're here for our customers, our clients, making sure our employees are safe. It's also about everything that's going on in, today in our communities, and all of the conversations on social and racial injustice, and us and our platform, and how we can use that for good is super important. And, listening to Dr. Goff talking about, the brand, it's not just about brand safety, it's about brand consciousness, right? And right. And what are we doing? And so I feel very fortunate that we, Jamie Dimon, this is not a new thing. It's not like we've woken up and said, this is what we're going to do.
You've been leading.
He's all about doing the right thing. We committed, $1.8 billion years ago, not just recently, but we're still going to do more. We're looking to do more, as we should in these times. And so it's, all about, again, getting proximate. And one last thing I would say to that point is it's, not just learning about our customers, our clients, but, when all the, when everything went down on, George Floyd, and I think, God rest his soul, he did not die in vain, because I really do believe we are going to continue to be better as a society and a community, even though, this is challenge. These are challenging times.
Forever changed.
But it's all about talking, talking and listening. So I have 45 Black VP to managing directors that work in the marketing organization. And I spoke to every one of them. And that's not just about me. We all did that as a, and it's all about ongoing conversations, and it's emotional and it's raw and it's painful. And I've been in business for 30 years and I feel like a filter's been lifted. Like, where have I been? I didn't know Juneteenth. I mean, I'll be completely honest.
Yeah.
That wasn't something I understood.
Yeah.
But when we understood it, we were one of the very few banks to close, on the afternoon and, and take over, Blackout Tuesday and take over our properties and, and try to do our part in getting involved in the conversation, because that's the only way.
And Leslie, I think to your point, and this goes down to leadership, it's not just putting a black box on your Instagram one day or closing the branches for a half a day in the afternoon, which by the way is a pretty big business move in the scheme of things, pretty advanced in comparison to others.
On a payday,
yeah, on a
by
payday.
The way, and that was really hard, but it was the right decision.
And I think the question becomes, 12 months from now, 19 months from now, it's about fixing the not the sink. And I think all of us are looking deep on that. Roy, any questions for our incredible CMO here?
Curious. Well, first off, thank you for the Juneteenth move. It is my goal to make Juneteenth a paid month off. I don't know how we're going to do this, but if JPMorgan Chase wants to be the first to take that step.
Move it to August, because everybody's trying to take off. We're trying to become like Europe in America. I could not believe how many out of office replies I got last year in August. I grew up in the wine business, Roy, and I would literally try to buy wine for the holidays in August when I was a kid, when I first got in the game, and Italy, France, Spain, and I'm like, where are these people? And then finally somebody said, oh, Europe doesn't work in August. I'm like, what?
They're chilling. Leslie, talk to me real quick. How is the company's relationship changed with small businesses during the COVID crisis, and as that's going to continue to evolve for small businesses?
Yeah, I mean, well, first and foremost, we have over 4 million small businesses that we serve every day. And, and we did everything we could. It was a crazy time, I think, between government and the banks trying to, and you couldn't move fast enough to try and make sure, there's 20% of them that will really never come back. And in Black and brown communities, that's even more, harder hit. And
Correct.
So it's super important. I mean, we were on the front lines. We feel we did everything we could in the moment. Can we continue to do better? I don't think it's in our rear view mirror. One of our things, Roy, it's not just about, our small business CEO, Jen Roberts, but as it relates to our foundation and some of the things that we do in the community, leaning in for small businesses is one of our 4 pillars, along with affordable housing and financial health and jobs and skills. And so, so we feel like we have an incredibly important job. They're our clients every day, and they're the livelihood of the economy, right? Over 70% of the jobs. And so, so that's our job as a large financial institution to make sure that we're doing our part. And so listening, being out there, making sure that we're providing them real-time information besides their loans is just, people are cash flow. They're looking for information right now. And so again, it's just making sure, are we being as relevant as we can, along with, being in the communities and doing our part as a financial institution. So, so it's an incredibly important role that we play, and we will, and we lean in and continue to play.
Stop.
We appreciate it, Les. Thank you so much for getting with us this morning.
Thanks for the invite, guys.
Talk to you soon. Of course. Talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
She's very nice.
She's
very nice.
She's smarter than she's nice. She's
you know what I'll give you, Gary V? You do a wonderful job of curating interactions with people in business who are not uptight. Like,
Listen, I'm so not the part of uptight that I had to find a couple of others that could jam with me.
Like, legit, like, I've never seen you talk to a button down. Well, Gary, we are the company and we are trying to, it's like, no, everybody you talk with is somebody I'd have a drink with. I appreciate
that, Ray. Thank you for the observation. Let's keep moving.
All right, next up, Sandra Sims Williams, who joins us as the SVP of Diversity and Inclusion at Nielsen. Sandra is a transformational leader with 30 years of experience linking diversity and inclusion strategies with corporate initiatives. Prior to joining Nielsen, she was Publicis Group Chief Diversity Officer. We're excited to hear from Sandra and her knowledge in this field. Sandra Sims Williams, good morning.
Good morning, Roy. I like the way you say that. Say that again.
Sandra Sims Williams.
Let's get hey, post-creative team, let's get that on loop for Sandra so we can give her a little meme for her TikTok.
Sims Williams.
There you go. There you go.
Sandra, thank you so much for being here. Obviously, you know, this is really fun for me because I came into the marketing industry about 11 years ago, and you know, I've been trying to rack my brain since I knew you were going to be here, who the individual was, but like literally one of the first 7 or 8 names of an executive in the industry that I've ever heard was yours. And it's just a real honor to be here. Throwing around legendary status, I think GOAT has become a lot of like, people throw that. My son the other day named a first-year wide receiver a GOAT. And I said, wait a minute, let him play a little bit. But I think it would be very apparently proper in this scenario. So I'm very excited personally to have you on.
Thank you very much, Gary. It's nice to be here.
That.
I've actually heard about you too. I've followed you a little bit. You're a little wild, but I like that.
A little wild. Roy was saying that a little bit earlier. A little wild, a little different, but you know, good intent and like hard work and good stuff like that. And you know, innovation always gets considered a little wild for sure.
Absolutely.
You know, I wanted to ask this earlier, so I'm going to go right into this. I think a word that has just completely pierced me during this last 100 days from a social standpoint, because I've always thought about it from a business and a parenting standpoint, is the accountability. Mm-hmm. You know, you know, your perspective on that word during these times. Obviously, you had with Publicis, you had such a major organization, such an important role there, and the ad land is not necessarily the greatest when it comes to D&I and things of that nature. So I'm sure you had, you know, plenty of challenges and opportunities to make big change. But what about that word? What about that word accountability?
Well, you know, I believe that you have to start with looking at an organization from the representation, from the top to the bottom. That's accountability. The optics really do matter. The optics. I agree. And looking at your metrics. So now I'm at Nielsen, where measurement is very important. That's what they do. That's how they, you know, just get up in the morning, they're measuring. So it's about making sure that although I will say, for me at Nielsen now, there's a new type of accountability because they start meetings talking about people. And they're asking for their managers and leaders to create opportunities for diverse associates, because, you know, you can bring them in all day long, but if they do not have the opportunities to grow, then so what? So managers are asked to be checking in. How are you doing on your team? How diverse is the team? Who got promoted and who got hired? So the managers and leaders are being asked to be accountable. We're also accountable to the board. I have my first board meeting on tomorrow. I'm testing myself right now. Okay, so I have to get level here. So it's about HR reviews. We are definitely about people first. And the executive leadership we tie their executive incentives to the leader's team. They have to have team goals, diversity goals. Each member of the executive team must also actively be involved with our ERGs. And the associates have to show D&I contributions in their review, their performance review. So they go pretty deep, and I appreciate it. We also have, when we talk about measurement, we have an inclusion index, an employee survey that also gives us indications of whether or not, you know, we're really doing this truthfully. So that's accountability.
I understand. Right.
Sandra, as a minority in this space and being charged with, you know, spearheading this level of change, what level of responsibility do you feel to your white coworkers in making sure that they're also informed on everything that's going on, in terms of not necessarily who you answer to, but how much of a responsibility do you feel you have in this space, to be a minority in this space, to educate other people about the need for this change?
So I've been doing this for approximately 20 years. So this is absolutely my passion. And I feel a tremendous responsibility to respond to everyone. This is about all of us. This isn't about just Blacks or Latinas. It is about everybody. Because, you know, when you look at it, we are all in it together and we can't do it separately. We really can't. So I have actually spoken to my Black associates and said, I know you get tired of answering questions, but this is the time to answer the questions. The door is open like it has never been open before, where your white colleagues want to talk. We have to talk. And I'm a big believer in conversation. I really am. We did have a town hall on race and privilege, and it was raw. And it was there to help open that door to the conversations. After that, since that town hall, I've been having roundtable conversations with each of the business units, their leaders and their associates, so that you can actually just, and these are sort of closed door. This is where you can just ask the questions, okay? Just ask the questions, because you know what? You're ignorant, I know it, you know it, and let's all just pool our ignorance together.
Yeah. It's
yeah,
and
Sandra, Sandra, in that, I'd love to get into your mindset on this. In that, you know, when somebody hears you're ignorant or things of that nature, people are just defensive by nature across the board. As it's a human conditioning across the board. Is there strategies that leaders, both Black and white, can think about to make someone feel more comfortable and not make it a tonality around shame, but opportunity? Do you think about that through? Because I notice when I go into these combos, I can feel it. Like, nobody wants to be told that they're privileged. Nobody wants to be told that they're ignorant or they're bad. And I'm thinking a lot about what's the unlock, because all I see is people locking in deeper. What, you know, how do you think about that to make people feel comfortable from a, you know, from a strategy standpoint of even the wordsmithing, or just, you know, because I really do, I'm really spending a lot of time listening to, of course, listening in the macro, the way we're talking about, but even just reading hundreds of thousands of interactions online over the last 8 weeks. And I feel like the second somebody says something that makes someone feel insecure about it, all of a sudden I see them lock in. And I've been thinking a lot about what's the framework that allows someone to become more vulnerable, to accept it so that they can build. Thoughts on that?
Yeah. First of all, I'm tired. You're afraid. We need to pull that. We need to understand that. This is about self-awareness, and this is about giving it up. I'm going to give up my shield and my armor, and you give up yours. I'm no better than you. You know better than me. This is the room in which we're going to sit, chit chat, and hopefully by the end of it, smile.
I love that.
It's breaking it down. That's all. I'm not here to fight each other. That's not what we're here for. We're here to actually engage and have that kind of decent human conversation. This is about humanity. That's what
100%. 100%. Yes, it is.
For the companies that aren't as diverse or don't have a plan as detailed as Nielsen, how important, because I feel like what we're getting into now with a lot of corporations, there's an arms race to be Blacker, or there's an arms race to be more diverse right now for the sake of, you know, brand safety.
Check in the box. Yep.
Yeah. And so is it more important to have a plan, or is it more important to have the speed of execution right now? Even if you don't have a plan, just get diverse versus really sitting and laying out something.
Goodness, no. It is about having a plan. Because if you don't have a plan, people get hurt, and we start to look bad and smell bad. You know, you have to start with a plan. Where is it that you want to take this? Really, where is it that you want to take it? I always suggest that we look at the representation. You decide how you want this plan to be laid out. I mean, nobody builds a building without a plan. You have to have a plan, and it requires you looking at how many floors you want and what you want on those floors. It requires you looking deeply within your organization to say, look at the board of directors, look at your leadership team, Because truly, when you start bringing people in and they look at it, then they lose hope if they don't see anything that looks like them. There has to be the rainbow. It really does have to be a rainbow, because in advertising, we are talking to multiple people all the time, differences all the time. If we don't have people in the room who can speak to that, then you of course you've known the mistakes that have been made. Because
that's right. And to your point, forget about some of the kind of things that have been big news for complete tone deaf. It's even, let's go to the everyday that, that matters in that world, which is if you can't create relevance, the thing you've just spent all your time and money on is not going to work anyway. So to your point, there are the occasional, which is devastating, real tone deaf, and there's really some real issues with that. I think the hidden 99% to what you're saying, Sandra, is that every day people are spending millions of dollars to make something happen. And because they don't understand, whether you're talking slang, references, innuendo, casting, a nuance, one word, and because you don't understand that, the whole thing didn't work. And that's happening. And I try to tell business, because you know this better than I do. I'm in it enough to now know it. So many of them play defense across everything. D&I, everything, defense. I'm like, forget about defense. You're talking about the occasional once every 10 years, once every 3 years thing. How about every day? By not doing this, you're missing out on opportunity for growth, which is what you're here for.
Yeah, and the other piece I wanted to make sure is that even though we sprinkle the room with people that are different, if the landscape does not afford me opportunity to be better, do better, and be supported, and that requires that you have programs. When I arrived here at Nielsen, it was interesting. They had a program called Diverse Leadership Network, and it was really a mini MBA style program for our diverse associates. And the interesting piece for me is that they gave them opportunities, they mentored them, they gave them high profile assignments. They had a coach, and what comes from that, they've had about 4 or 5 years of it, is that every time I meet somebody who's been through DLN, they are superior. So you have to equip people to be able to navigate these organizations that they go in. You can't just hire people and think that it's going to be magic. It's not. You have to support them. That's what's called equity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What are some ways? Please. What are some ways? I guess lastly, I'm not sure how much time we have. But,
2 minutes, but you got it right.
But what are some ways that companies that are dealing with remote working can motivate and facilitate more diversity and inclusion and interaction? Because it's easy to disassociate yourself with coworkers that you don't have social similarities to, that the people who you don't kick it with at the office, you're definitely not kicking it with them outside of Zoom at the house. So what are some ways that some companies could, maybe encourage interaction amongst employees now?
Well, we have actually asked our managers to have social hours because it's necessary. By the way, because there are people who are isolated by home, and they need to be incorporated in a group or with other people. So I think this is one of those rare times where you just have to pull people in. We've also asked managers to call on people who are isolated. And because of Zoom, we have the capability of, talking to people all over the world. I will say, since I've only been there 6 months, that doing that kind of thing has helped me actually, onboard. So it is not, this is actually a rare time, but it's a good time to really engage people individually. So every manager is really required to just check in and say, how are you doing? In fact, we start our meetings, how are you doing? Because that question now is very real.
Yes, it is.
It's very real.
She is Sandra Sims Williams, SVP Diversity and Inclusion of Nielsen. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Sandra. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure for me. Anytime I could be a help, let me know.
Thank you. All right, take care, both of you.
Thank you.
Roc Nation Unified. He's the co-CEO. Brett Yormark is the president of business operations and strategy. Brett spearheaded Roc Nation Unified, the organization's commercial and consultative arm that works with artists, athletes, leagues, teams, and brands Before joining Roc Nation, Brett spent 14 years as CEO of BSC Global, which manages and controls Barclays Center, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Nets G League team, the Long Island Nets. We're excited to welcome Brett and have him share some knowledge. Sorry about that, Brett. Welcome to Marketing for the Now.
Hello, everyone. Thrilled
hey, Brett,
to be
how are
here.
you?
And guys, listen, just to start off, Gary,
Yes, sir.
I know you're a busy guy, but you know, when I did a little research last night, all these recent announcements, Constellation, getting into the baseball business, getting into the gaming business, I think as of yesterday. So congrats on all your success, all the great things you and your company are doing. I continue to be amazed. And then Roy, I understand that you're from Alabama. And when I was at NASCAR, I used to make it to Alabama, you know, to Talladega.
Yes.
I promised one of my dear friends, Deontay Wilder, that I will visit one of his upcoming training camps. So I plan on getting to Alabama sooner than later.
Trust me, you don't want to visit nothing Deontay Wilder doing. You're going to leave 4 pounds lighter, all that sweating and training that boy did.
Hey, listen, as Gary knows, I'm a big boxing fan. So it'll be a big moment for me to visit his camp.
Well, I will watch you two box.
In your home state.
Let me take that segue. Brett has been one of the individuals I've known the longest in my transition to the marketing and business world from the wine world. We met actually when Brett was with the Nets and they were in New Jersey on their transition. And it's really, like, let me just be very frank, it's been love at first sight. And so I'm very excited that Brett's here. Brett, you're such a tour de force, you know, in general as a human, which is why I adore you. What's been the biggest challenge for you? Just, I think, you know, we've been talking a lot about D&I here, we're talking a lot of business. I actually think this is an interesting question for you as somebody who's so on the go, so intense, winning mentality, people mentality. Like, what's been the biggest challenge for you? Because I think there's a lot of diverse people watching right now, from entrepreneurs to startup to executives to Fortune 500. For you personally, just a fun question to start off with. What's been the biggest challenge and what's been the most exciting part? Actually, oh, wait a minute, I actually like this that I never would have thought of. What's been the biggest pro and con as we're, you know, 4 months into this thing?
It's a great question. I was never a believer in working remotely. You know, I'm a pretty disciplined guy, pretty formal in my approach to business. And I gravitated to it. You know, I found that I was productive. People in the company were productive. It was something that, you know, ultimately I enjoyed. I think the negative part of it was the monotony. You know, as you said, I like to move around. I'm no different than you. You know, no meetings, no travel. I miss the engagement with my colleagues. I mean, we were doing Zooms every morning, but there's nothing that replaces that true connectivity in the office, that client rapport when you're talking to brands and different businesses that you engage with. So that was a bit of a challenge for me, but overall it was a pretty good experience. Now, what I was most excited about, and we are back in the office now as of last week.
You are?
Yes, okay. We are. We took this time to think about, how do we reimagine the business? How do we reinvent the business? How do we diversify our revenue streams? How do we better prepare, if you will, for the new norm? And I have spent a lot of time with my colleagues and our board thinking about all those things. And in the coming weeks, we'll make some announcements with respect to how we're going to diversify Roc Nation and get into different types of businesses that we think will thrive in the new norm. So we use this time to our advantage, and I'm happy we took that approach.
I love that. Roy?
As you're starting to reopen, what are you battling? Like, what's the biggest challenge in just getting back into the office and then still dealing with clients that themselves are remote?
Well, Roy, we took a phased approach. We opened up last week for only those that had physical offices. This week, those that are in common areas, we're welcoming back into the office. The board and our operations team spent an enormous amount of time over the last couple of months developing protocols. As we all know, it's all new. There isn't a best practice. There isn't a blueprint. But we outsourced a lot of thinking. And I think what we've done effectively here is we've created our own bubble. Our employees feel very safe. We're doing mandatory testing. when you enter the building. Temperature checks, social distancing. We've reconfigured the office in some respects, decals on the floors. I mean, we've put a lot of measures in place to show our employees that we're an employee-first culture here. I think the biggest anxiety, candidly, is, you know, the things we don't control, and that's how people arrive and how they depart. Outside of that, we think we've controlled the environment pretty effectively.
Let me get this question in because I'm dying to hear from you, and I'm sure you're gonna have a big insight. Live events, huge part of Roc Nation. Yes. Basically, I'm a very little kind of like business secret of mine is my speaking career really subsidized the fact that I could build this Vayner empire. Like I, don't pay myself as much, like pour money into the business because I'm able to live off of my speaking. That completely went away, and I had to reconfigure and think about things on that front. I speak to a lot of artists, as you know, Brett, and a lot of them are worried. I think people are very confused on where some of the economics sit in the entertainment world. Obviously Roy brought it up right at the top of the show. Comedians, Chris Rock wanted to do everything so you'd go to the show because the economics are very real. What's the future of live events? What are you seeing? What are you hearing from artists, whether they're yours or others? This is a big part of Roc Nation's business, I assume. How are you and the team thinking about that?
Well, listen, the live event business will come back. I mean, that's for sure. And I think we're all playing the long ball game here. You look at some of the forecasts, whether they be promoters or, event companies and venues. I mean, I think sometime in spring, maybe first or second quarter 21 is when we'll see some live events.
Are you feeling like Q2 2021 seems like the beginning?
Yeah, I think that's where everyone's targeting,
so
because you got to announce the tours, right? The routing. I mean, it takes time to get up and running again. I obviously was in the live event business overseeing Barclays and other venues in the marketplace, and the venues need to get ready. I mean, I just read yesterday that... Actually,
I apologize for interrupting. Isn't it going to be very challenging? Because the NBA, you have to assume, is not going to start up in October. Obviously, when you're an arena, you've got your home teams and you navigate around that. It might be a little bit of a pickle if, for say, the NBA starts in, like, you may not know their schedule until much later, right?
That's true. And having been in contact with a lot of venues, there's a lot of scenario management going on and driven by the core tenants in the building, to your point.
Yeah.
But, you can route around, those events. No different than what has historically happened. But, venue operations is going to have to rethink that whole consumer experience. They're going to have to do things very differently. You think about the culinary experience. Grab and go is what people are going to do. Those chef table experiences, the premium offering is probably not going to be on the table, at least in the near future. You think about ingress and egress. You think about your manifest, your seating manifest. What do you need to do there? I'm hearing that when and if teams come back, they're not going to go to season tickets. They're going to sell single game tickets so they can really control the manifest. It's a whole new world, at least in the short term, but things will come back. I mean, everyone loves the live business, and hopefully sooner than later.
So then, to that point, if I could piggyback off of Gary's question, between now and then, where does culture live? Because if you're a budding artist and you haven't quite broken through, you needed the smaller radio shows, you needed to open for so-and-so at the 1,200 seat amphitheaters. You don't have any of that now. So as a company, how are you all taking some of your smaller artists and making sure that they're able, that pot can still simmer until it's time to put them back out on the road and not go cold?
It's a great question, Roy. We've been very busy with our emerging artists. We have a very sizable platform, branded EQ, and then obviously we've got over 190 artists when you think of our label and artist management. And many of our artists have stayed engaged. They have, they're breaking new music. They're doing it in non-traditional ways. We have a big promotional department here that is making sure those songs and that new music is being heard. There's different platforms now that are helping to activate our artists. And I'm thrilled with how relevant you know, they've stayed. I mean, you look at a Fat Joe as an example, who's a Roc Nation artist starting an Instagram show and has done extremely well. I mean, Alicia Keys has done everything right. You know, when you think about how she's engaged with her fan base, you know, which has been very purpose driven. Some, you know, artists have decided to sit on the sideline, but many have decided this is an opportunity for me to build my profile, engage with my fan base, utilize the power and influence of social media. And we have a very sizable social media department here that obviously works very closely with our artists, both emerging and established. So that's been a big part of what we've been doing over the last couple of months, making sure that our artists are staying relevant, they're staying active and busy, and finding non-traditional ways for them to do it.
Brett, in last couple of minutes here, any insight, you've obviously talking to a lot of athletes and artists, you've been around it pretty much your whole career, you know, any interesting insight, whether pro or con, like, wow, I didn't realize artists really needed X, or athletes have surprisingly stayed in shape or not, or anything kind of interesting on that front?
Yeah, you know, it is interesting. I've always been a fitness guy, as you know, and I've always advocated a healthy lifestyle. And what I've seen with
by the way, I apologize for interrupting. Everybody can't see it. Roy, I need you to know this. Brett's in shape. He's in real shape.
Ripped.
No, I am in real shape. I will say that. Very humbly, I'm in good shape.
Look what he just said. He's in real
shape. Show the
shape.
pecs, man. Go ahead and raise up a little bit.
Take off the shirt. Take off your shirt, Brett. Go ahead.
You know, Gary, if you want to see me make my runs in the Hamptons, you can see it.
Listen, I'm scared. I'm scared of how, I don't even want to come near you, because then we might have to compare, and I'm not interested in that fight. You are in real shape. Go ahead.
Well, but I will tell you this. I've been pleasantly surprised how many of our artists have taken onto this whole fitness craze and wellness. And, you know, I'm a big advocate of it. And you know, given the world we live in now, and I think everyone's gravitated to wellness and living a healthy lifestyle. It doesn't guarantee you anything, but it gives you a fighting shot. And I think artists and athletes have seen that. I've spoken to a couple of GMs in the NBA, and they were surprised by how well conditioned the athletes are coming back into camp. And I'm seeing it obviously with our artists. You know, they have used this time to really transform themselves. I mean, one artist in particular who has gone through an incredible transformation is Yo Gotti. I mean, I've never seen someone go through what he's done. And one of our athletes, you've probably seen recent photos of CC Sabathia. I mean, what he has done, I mean, he looks better now than he ever looked when he played the game. And did you see Carmelo?
Did you see Carmelo Anthony, that photo?
I have not seen that one.
You have to see this photo. It's like, you know, it's unbelievable what kind of, like, how he's lost a significant amount. I'm dying to see what it means. It's going to be intriguing. I'm ready for bubble basketball. I'm ready for bubble basketball.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, I'm excited about it. It'll be very interesting. I think Adam Silver and the league have done an incredible job creating a very safe environment for the players. And I'm really looking forward to July 30th when it all tips off.
And by the way, just the bubble life, some of the content. I mean, these basketball players, I mean, people forget they're kids.
Yes.
You know, we hold them up. Like somebody hit me up yesterday. I was like, I'm like, the kid you're yelling at right now is 19. I'm like, do you know what you were doing when you were 19? Like it's we forget, but some of the content is just hilarious.
No, the content's been great. And I will say, I admire all the athletes that are in that bubble. I mean, it's not an easy thing.
And I also really admire the athletes, both in baseball and basketball, that are opting out because they're having a baby, because they have I just have a lot of compassion and respect on both fronts. And obviously a lot of it's circumstantial to family dynamics. And please.
You bring up a good point. You know, I think the other thing that we've all realized, and I did too on a personal level, I have 2 children, that there's nothing that replaces family. Nothing. And it's got to be family first. And I think people
and you're seeing it.
Are gravitating to that notion now. And to your point, you know, those that are putting family before anything else, you've got to admire that move.
The most for me, because you know they're competitors. You know,
Absolutely.
you know, I mean, I know this because I would, if I was given the gift of being that, I would have, and I had a family situation, I would have picked family and let it be on the record. It would be killing me because I'm that animal. I'm that athlete. I need to be on that court. So I just have a lot of admiration for that.
Agreed.
I have a lot of admiration for you too, Brett. I can't wait to see you again soon.
Right back at you. Thank you, everybody. Good to
Brett Yormark with Roc Nation Unified, the co-CEO. Let me know if you need an out-of-shape comedian on your Roc Nation roster. I'll open up for one of yours. All right, now I can confirm that our next guest is the guest that's on the sheet of paper in front of me. You're gonna like him, Gary. This is the first person I've ever seen whose shirt matches the background of their Zoom. The global CMO of Restaurant Brands International is Fernando Machado, and he is a global marketer with a passion for growing brands, businesses by pushing creative boundaries to drive growth. With more than 160 lines and cons, 16 D&AD yellow pencils, and 2 Grand Effies in North America, Fernando pushes the creative boundaries to drive business growth, focusing on infusing brands with purpose, modernizing their design, and inspiring the organization around brand development. He's been recognized for many awards, including Adweek's Grand Brand Genius in 2013 and 2018, only person to win the award twice, and Business Insider recognized him as a top 10 person transforming advertising, and most recently Ad Age named him CMO of the Year for 2020. Let's welcome Fernando. Peep the shirt, peep the background. Welcome, Fernando, to Marketing for the Now.
Thanks, man. I'm super excited to be here. It's great to be talking to you guys.
Fernando, thank you so much for being here. Obviously, a lot of admiration. We run in very similar circles. We haven't had the opportunity to jam too much, so I'm glad we're doing it this morning.
Yes, you may not remember, man, but like we brought you to give a talk for the Dove team back in 2011-12.
At the at Cannes in that little villa?
No, it was in London.
Oh, in London?
Before that.
Yep.
And I still remember you telling everyone like how when you were a kid, you were like putting signs in New Jersey and looking at what people are driving and where they were looking at to put the sign right where they were looking at.
I appreciate that.
I remember the story, man. We had lunch together back then, long time ago.
I appreciate it. And it's great to see you again. And obviously it's been unbelievable to watch what you've been doing with Burger King. And I think let's go right into that. I think a lot of the interviews I've been doing in this series over the last month and a half have been around, hey, you've learned how to go fast and have many ideas during this time. And it's this novel idea. You know, obviously that's been a very big foundational thing for VaynerMedia on volume of ideas and relevance. Subjectively, watching from the outside, there have been very few people that have understood culture and having a volume of ideas and speed the way that BK and the overall restaurant group has had. What do you attest that to? You know, how has that been over the last half decade? Do you agree with my observation and what's happened with COVID to accelerate it, or status quo because you lived in that bubble?
Yeah, so I think that like we evolved to become what we are today. Right? I mean, 6-7 years ago, I don't think we would do things at the same pace as we do today. It's like training, you know what I mean? Like if you are like not training, you're just like a couch potato, and the next day you want to run a marathon, you'll probably struggle, right? I mean, it requires time for you to get there. So back in 2014, that's when we started. And I think that the ingredients behind the way we go about things are basically, we make the brand very clear to the people who work with us, especially the tone of voice of the brand, you know, the personality of the brand. Like, it's very easy for people to see something and say, oh, this is so Burger King, or only Burger King could do that, because our creative partners, they understand how the brand should operate. We make it clear to people that work with us, like what's our strategy, what we are trying to accomplish, like what are the key pillars, which are basically like a filter, right? I mean, for like what we are going to do. And honestly, like, we just try different things. You see what I'm saying? Like, I think that we do have some criteria, right? I mean, which you develop over time. I don't think marketing or advertising or trying to serve pop culture is something that you are born with. I think it's an acquired taste, and sometimes you get right, sometimes you get wrong. Sometimes you think something is going to be huge and this is small.
Do you think net though it wins? To your point, sometimes right, sometimes wrong. Sometimes you think it's gonna be huge. It doesn't. Other times you didn't even think about it. It becomes, but do you think in the net, that process outperforms the classic audacious, I'm gonna come up with an idea and push it down model?
No, I think so. Like, I think that some ideas take time to develop, and that's fine. You know, it's part of the nature of certain ideas, right? I mean, sometimes an idea is tied to a date. Sometimes an idea requires you to spend a lot of time building something so that you can make it happen. But like overall for me, like when people ask me like, what happens when it doesn't work? The answer is like nothing. But nothing tends to be a very common outcome for many marketing campaigns. So you may as well try to do something different, right? And be able to flip the page really quick if that doesn't work. You know, like what people are talking about today in social, you know that, like 2 days from now, they are on something else. This afternoon, they will be on something else. So
that's right.
If you want to be relevant in the fast-paced environment that we live in, I think that you need to find ways to do marketing on the now. It needs to be fast-paced because the world is fast-paced. So so I don't
the consumer
yeah.
is, so to your point, the consumer by nature's attention is completely different than it was based on the marketing model we live in today of TV centric. It's just not, it's built on a 1965, no remote control. You will see this video in between what you're watching. Yeah. And it's the furthest thing from what we live in now.
Yeah, and you say that. I know that you are, or you were, a big advocate of the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is the only time on the year where people want to watch ads.
I'm huge.
You know,
I love that you've been so active. You're absolutely right. I'm not in love with a lot of traditional things, I think the Super Bowl is grossly underpriced.
Yeah, no, I know. I read about it and I agree, because like you are paying, like during the whole year, you pay for people to watch something that they don't want to watch.
That's right.
And there is this one day that during like a couple of hours, is the number 2 reason is higher than the halftime show. People want to watch the ads. So it's a win-win. And if you have that in mind, if you have in mind that people actually don't necessarily want to watch your ads, you know, like I think it's a very liberating thought, because it forces you to create things that are interesting, and forces you to create things that will merit their attention, you know, that they'll give you something back, right? I mean, or that's surfing a wave of pop culture that people are already talking about. And this, I think, is marketing today. You know what I mean? Like you cannot rely anymore on doing like a super boring TV commercial, which may please your board, you know, like, because that was like what marketing was like many years ago, and your board is probably like is slightly older, right? I mean, it varies depending on the company you're in, but like it's not like that anymore. And the younger you go, the more relevant what we are talking about here will become. You know, for the kids, it's even more so.
Agreed. Roy?
So your company, RBI, you all handle Popeyes, Burger King, Tim Hortons, which are 3 distinctly different brands in terms of their culture. With COVID, what have been some of the things that you've been able to apply across the board with all 3 brands versus things that you've kind of had to nitpick from place to place?
Yeah, they are very different brands, even like on the center of gravity of the product category they operate, right? Tim's is coffee and baked goods, Popeyes is fried chicken, and BK is like sandwiches. There are some overlaps, but they are very different. Personality-wise, they are also very different. But there were, as you said, a couple of things that, as a company, we were able to do, not leverage across the 3 brands, but that they come from the same fundamental principle, right? I'm a firm believer that when it comes to purpose, when it comes to doing good, sustainability, just as an example, you need to do it first to then talk, you know? And I think that one thing that that the 3 brands did really well, and it was not necessarily a brief, it was just like the innate nature of the marketing teams. Like the 3 brands, when COVID hit, in most countries, I would say, the marketing team jumped into trying to do something to help society. You know what I mean? Honestly, without calculating the ROI, the cost per thousand, like nothing, you know, it just felt right. So for instance, Burger King, we knew that in the US, many families, they have their kids eating in school, and school was closed. So we offer free kids meal. With any purchase, you get a free kids meal. And it was a massive success for BK. On Tim Hortons in Canada, which is the largest counter for the brand, is a brand that's very linked to communities, okay? It's part of the DNA of being Canadian, this Tim Hortons, right? And what they did was they reached out and offered free coffee, free baked goods to healthcare professionals, to first responders, to volunteers, because that's how that brand operates. Popeyes is a brand that has a very strong root in Louisiana. So what did we do? Louisiana and New Orleans were one of the most affected areas in the beginning of COVID. So we went there and we offered more than 1 million family meals together with 2 different food banks. So the 3 brands, before we created an ad, before we ran a promotion, before we told about people that we were still safe or that we had delivery, we helped. And I think that was really critical. The other thing that we did was we took all the plans that we had pre-COVID and put them on hold or trashed them. And that's all good. You know, like I think that if you are, and I think going back to the previous point, if you're not used to be nimble and to do things fast, you will struggle a lot with making that decision. You know, because it means like, fuck, like I can curse here, right? So fuck, like I've been working on this forever, and now I have to trash and come up with something new, which will take forever, layers of approval, budget discussions, and this and that. We didn't care. And it's funny because one of the questions that we received a lot in the beginning was like, aren't you afraid that your advertising will be shown next to something that's COVID related and the pandemic? And I was like, no, why would I be? Because everything I'm developing takes that context into consideration.
Correct.
You should be scared if you are being completely
and Fernando,
listen,
I think you also know this, and obviously you're so prominent within the community, but sometimes our industry gets within itself. We talk about things that not a single human being actually is talking about. I mean, it's very and to your point, the greatest and most important power right now is context.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Absolutely.
I mean, and because the context changes so frequently, you need to be able, you cannot put all your eggs in the same basket, and you need to be able to shift. You know, like people talk a lot about pivot. You did the pivot to here, to that. Dude, you're doing pivot like every day, 5 times a day. Like,
it's literally the oxygen of running a business.
Exactly, and I find that incredibly exciting and liberating because it will allow, if you have a well-oiled machine, it will allow you to do many more things instead of, I used to say that in the past of my career, in the beginning of my career, and that's a terrible metaphor, but I would be like a sniper. I would spend like 3-4 months like aiming, and I would shoot. Most of the time we would hit the target, but if we didn't, it would be another 3-4 months of aiming, and the way we approach today is more like machine gun. You see, like we are really good at aiming with the machine gun too, and we are going to hit the right direction. And I think that because we do that approach, we're able to capitalize more into trends, more into what people are talking about.
Relevance, yes. Right? I mean, this industry is obsessed with potential reach, and it's missing the mark on relevance. Like people, it's hard to get people excited. Like for me, when I literally in a 1-year period watch both the final race of a Triple Crown race and an enormously important boxing match, and goddamn Burger King man is the king is in both settings. That's very big relevance to me. I'm like, oh, this brand, this is subconscious.
Man,
just like bias.
The next day, people were talking almost the same about Mayweather and Pacquiao. Then they were talking about the king beating Kimmel because the king came with Mayweather and Kimmel came with Pacquiao, and it became a conversation in itself. You know what I mean? Like you knew where everyone would be looking. Like so find a relevant way to insert your brand or your product or your message into that.
I couldn't agree more. I could talk to you for an hour and a half. We may need to do that podcast.
Dude, we need to organize that.
Yes, we will organize that. Take care of yourself. Thank you so much.
Nice to talk to you guys. Thank you so much. Thanks, Roy.
Fernando Machado, Global CMO of Restaurant Brands International. Thank you, good sir. All right, let's.
He's so good. We introduced him twice.
Yeah. He won an Adweek award twice, so it made perfect sense.
That's right. I see what you were doing there. Brilliant.
Let's finish strong. We're going to finish strong with the member of my Viacom family. This is Jenny Wall, CMO of Nickelodeon. Jenny brings her breadth of knowledge and experience from the marketing world. Before Nickelodeon, she was the CMO of Gimlet Media, a Spotify company. She was the head of marketing for Hulu, and prior to that was the VP of marketing at Netflix. We're excited to hear about Jenny's impressive experiences. And Jenny, please help my child stop watching Paw Patrol all the time around the clock. Y'all, you won. You won in this house. Paw Patrol everything.
Thank you. Paw Patrol everything.
Good job.
Jenny, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for being part of this and anchoring us this wonderful morning.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Roy. I'm excited to be here.
Jenny, I'm actually going to use your prior experience a little bit here to bring value because I'm reading Twitter and trying to bring as much value to everybody. Hashtag marketing for the now if you have a question or an observation. Jenny, talk to me about audio. Obviously, you know, you being at Gimlet and a pioneer there. Just 2 seconds before we go into other matters. How do you see audio as a medium? Where do you see it sitting? Obviously, you know, Roy's career a lot, you know, was built on the back of radio. We see this whole revolution of podcasting. Your 2 cents on it, because I do think you have a lot of important observations.
Yeah, I mean, audio, I specifically took the job at Gimlet in order to learn audio because I felt like it was an extremely important touch point that was missed during the day. That from that, I used to call it I still call it the eye to the ear strategy, meaning once they leave the couch, how do you actually keep people engaged in your brand? And with Alexa and with cars, it just makes sense that you continue the story throughout audio or whether that's in your ears. And it's also what I learned there is just how intimate really the audio experience is. And Daniel Ek said something really, I think, important when he acquired or his company acquired Gimlet. Obviously, that just showed the, I think, relevance of where they were putting their bets in regards to Spotify and betting in podcasts and also just audio storytelling. And he said, I can't believe that the ear or the eye is 10 times more expensive to buy than the ear. And he just felt like that was just something to say, this is actually an extremely important medium. And so going to there has actually helped me as another step in my career to realize, okay, let's just use an example for Blue's Clues. And maybe your son's too old for that, but Blue's Clues, we're gonna do story time with Josh and Blue, whereas you could use it at nap time or you could use it at bedtime. And so just trying to find these moments or like, okay, the average drive is 8 minutes to a preschool. What do I do with a kid in the car? And okay, I've got to listen to Story Pirates because it's actually an audio experience. And then also I just think that people's parents, including myself of a 6-year-old, especially during this time, is really trying to figure out how do I get my kid off the iPad? And if I can get them into more of imagination through sound and actually creating worlds just through
think that's a big deal.
Yeah, it's so anyway, that was longer than my 2 cents or 2 seconds, but I think audio.
But this is why we wanted you on, and this is why I wanted that question. I think your point when you listen to some of the incredible storytellers of the 1970s, 1960s, a lot of them refer to sitting around the radio and listening pre-TV as an incredible driver for their capacity for imagination. And I think why not replicate that? I like that. Roy?
When you all, let's just talk about the pivot at Nickelodeon, the cultural pivot, not COVID, but with George Floyd, and just tonally as a company, what were some of the internal discussions that you all had as you started making the decision on it? Because I feel like the corporations and networks, there was kind of a staggering of which companies and which media started doing stuff. And I feel like Nickelodeon was at the front of that. Where was the decision? Talk me through the decision to be one of the first networks to make a bold statement. And you can tell everybody what the statement was with the 846.
Yeah, so it wasn't hard at all. And that was, I think we realized very quickly what side we wanted to be on. And Viacom CBS came out with, we're gonna go dark. Bob came out, we're gonna go dark for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And we said, who's participating? And I have to give credit to my boss, Brian Robbins, didn't waste 1 second and said every single network, including Nick Jr. We did want to make a statement in regards to where our support lies. We also truly, truly believe that education and enlightenment starts at a very young age, and that we have the platform to help start education and actually foster those difficult conversations, but also help educate and enlighten is the word that we like to use. So not just entertain, but also enlighten. And so it was a very simple decision to go dark for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And so there was a couple different spots. There was a George Floyd, 8 minutes and 46 seconds of a man breathing, very, very provocative, that caused a lot of conversation, I will say, on Twitter and social, just about how to talk to children. And we also ran a kids' Bill of Rights for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, so that you have the right to be heard, you have the right to not be judged by the color of your skin, you have the right to an education. That's turned into a much larger campaign that we're running. But that also, so it was a very easy decision for us. And, you know, we believe, you know, all the conversation, you know, really opened up to say, listen, you know, we can actually talk to our kids about more difficult things. And it allowed us to say, listen, we're treating our children like with kid gloves. And we're also treating our children, you know, some people have different experience, and some kids live in fear every day. And we owe it to ourselves, for white children, for Black children, to open this conversation, because racism starts between the ages of 2 and 4 and is embedded by age 12. And I think that we have them in the sweet spot, 2 to 11. And so we cannot not help in this situation. And thus, I think, then moving on to the Juneteenth education that we did on that Friday, the 19th, and then moving to Alicia Keys, we did another town hall for race, kids, and unity. That, again, you could watch on YouTube if you'd like. It's a really incredible, some schools have picked it up to sort of teach and help start the conversation. But it was not hard for us at all. And we're continuing to, I've now made this an initiative at Nickelodeon where, you know, we're putting money behind it, and I'm working with Maverick Carter, LeBron's company, and we're hopefully working with them. We're coming up with ways we could work together to develop content, whether short form, long form, that this is not just a campaign, it's a sustained effort that we continue to do both inside the company and outside the company, meaning diversify our employees also, as well as our vendors and our outside, behind the camera, in front of the camera. It's become a huge initiative for us, and we are definitely not slowing down.
What's the biggest challenge for, you know, you and your executive team during COVID itself, when it first hit? Were you surprised by any of the remote capabilities, or did you feel like that was going to work out? You have obviously worked in some progressive companies in the past. Did you yourself, are you missing it, like random interactions in the office and travel, or are you loving this? Like a little bit of just like the insights to leaders during this time.
I think it's incredible how people have creatively pivoted and sort of embraced and solved a lot of the creative adaptability, if you will. So yes, I think we all miss a little bit of those hallway conversations, and we miss being able to, you know, basically just walk in and talk to somebody. But I think what's been really great is we've been able to figure out how to do our work, even if it comes down to shoots, like working with families to shoot themselves. And I think what we've, you know, I think Gary, you and I talked a little bit about this, is sort of, you know, the humanistic approach. With the stuff we're doing now is a lot less polished, and actually it's working better for us because it's more human, and it's more about actually families and them interacting together. So I think that's been a really positive. I'll say the hardest thing for us is that not being in production with new shows. So we're coming up, we're not able to go on set. So I think just keeping the content alive, meaning that we're coming up with shows like Unfiltered, which is sort of a game show that we do completely remotely. We have these Danger Force shorts we're doing completely remote. Our marketing team is now developing shows. We developed a SpongeBob fan favorite special with the cast rereading. Cool. You should go check it out. It's really fun.
I will.
It's on YouTube, but they're acting out famous scenes, and it's really great. But so we're just coming up with kind of creative ideas of what programming could be, because this might last for a really long time. Animation, obviously.
How long? Yeah, animation's in a better spot than live action or filming. Do you feel like this is, like, what's your personal, like, any insights to that? I mean, are we looking at, at this point, it feels like the rest of this year is definitely not going to be the normal we knew prior to this. Is there programming concerns? Or, because I was going to just ask that, your animation chops, do you feel like you're sitting in a little bit of a better spot than maybe some of your contemporaries?
I think we are setting, I mean, animation takes a really long time to do. So we're having to speed up that process a little bit, but it's really great. We have some amazing shows like Casa Grande and Loud House. We have new SpongeBob. We have It's Pony we just renewed. We've also just, you know, greenlit a bunch of other things that will happen come next summer. So I think we're in a very good place there. And I think we're also in a very good place that we've got an incredible YouTube team that comes from Full Screen, run by Ashley Kaplan, that actually can make incredible content remotely really well. So I think we're in a really good spot, but I would say that for the rest of this year, it is going to be challenging, you know, especially with what's happening in California, how it seems to be getting worse at the moment. But we're cautiously optimistic that we'll get a few things in, and we're shooting some things in Vancouver, which is in a better space. So I think we're definitely going to have a good Q4. And so that's a thing. I think some people that are able to shoot, let's say in Europe, might be at a better place, but if you can shoot in Canada, you
right. It makes a lot of sense. Right.
As a parent, how much does that help you at your job?
Oh, immensely. Another reason I say I take each job I take for a reason. When I took audio, I wanted to learn audio. I took this job, one, because I wanted to see if I love Brian Robbins. I think he's an incredible leader and I always wanted to work for him. And I also just felt being 6 years sort of on the digital side, what could I bring to a linear channel that's evolving into digital to help it make that move? But it's also, I would be lying if I said it does. I love it that I'm a hero that my 6-year-old kid loves what I do, and also loves the stuff I work on. But I also have a focus group of 1 here, that I can bounce things off him, and I run trailers behind him and say, you know, in front of him. And so it's really incredible. And also it's really helped open dialogue. You know, the thing we were talking about before with George Floyd and racism, about how I talk to my child. And it's helped that figure out, like, how do I talk to a kindergartner about racism? He's going to be in 1st grade. And how do I talk to a sixth grader? And it's very different. And so we're finding these ways to figure out, how do I make the most impact with each age? And so I do have one focus group of 1 here that's 6 that I can bounce some things off of.
Really important question for me. Can you please go to some sort of warehouse and steal some rare Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff for me so I can flip it on eBay? Can we make that trade? Is that allowed?
No comment on this big part, but we do have some new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff coming up, which I'm super excited about.
Is it, you know, one thing I'm very fascinated by, I just heard new SpongeBob, new TMNT, right? Like, it's kind of intriguing. Just give a little glimpse into this that I think a lot of viewers wouldn't think about, which is the incredible opportunity that once a franchise does hit that status, it really does play, quote unquote, in perpetuity. Like, you actually get to reboot, restructure, think about, spin off. It is a real gift to be able to play with these kind of franchises. It's also probably a huge responsibility. I'm sure there's a lot of emotion and politics behind it, but it is fascinating. I mean, just when I heard you say, you know, some new SpongeBob, I'm like, ooh, you know, TMT, ooh, like it's powerful to have these franchises. Thoughts?
Extremely powerful for us. And just also, we have the whole CP side of this. So we know that, you know, that from a plush perspective, like Blue's Clues right now is the #1 toy in Walmart, even during this period of time. I think people are looking for some comfort, but we have that whole side of where we can actually touch lives in a bunch of different areas when we create these franchises. But like SpongeBob, yes, new SpongeBob still plays incredibly well. And then also the spinoffs, like we have Camp Coral coming up. We have a Patrick Star spinoff. We have a Sandy Cheek spinoff. So we really are able to build on that franchise because all of the characters are so rich. And then working on the Broadway play that we aired, also the SpongeBob musical. If you haven't seen that, it is so fun. But it really takes it into a different realm, but also just as the same humor.
I thought that was super, I saw it, it was super clever. Like, that was a challenge.
Oh, huge challenge.
You know, when I first heard it, I'm like,
yeah,
I thought it was extremely well done. Not, by the way, not like, I was pumped. I was like, I'm an operator. So I'm like, how the hell would I operate that? Like, where are you going creatively with that? And I thought it was super clever where they took that.
I think the biggest thing that was hard is that SpongeBob doesn't know people exist. So he doesn't really understand the world. And so then you've got people playing SpongeBob and Patrick. And so there's that little suspension of disbelief you have to create. And those characters have to really embody those characters under the sea in Bikini Bottom. And they did an incredible job. So
Jenny, you did an incredible job here. Thank you for your time. Hope you have a great rest of the week. And thank you for your leadership in marketing community.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. It was good to see all of you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Roy, what an incredible job. You were fantastic. I don't know if anybody caught it. By far the highlight was when the little one came in and you had to interact there in the middle of the interview. That was my personal favorite.
Oh, you saw that? Sorry.
I saw that. And I also desperately need you, real quick, before we leave here, can you just do me a huge favor and can you just introduce fully Fernando one more time?
Absolutely.
I've always thought that, you know, hat tricks were the way to go. So let's just give you a minute to do that.
Next up, we have Fernando Machado, who serves as CMO of Burger King. He is a global marketer with a passion for growing brands, businesses by pushing creative boundaries to drive business growth. With more than 160 Lions and Cannes, 16 DNA yellow pencils, and 2 Grand Emmys in North America.
Too many to count, Roy. Too many to count.
So much stuff. Fernando's known for pushing the creative boundaries to drive business growth. He focuses on infusing brands with purpose, modernizing the design, and inspiring the organization around brand development. Fernando is twice been recognized by Adweek. Brand genius. Yes.
Please tell everybody, because you're crushing it. The Vayner Nation's in love. Where can people follow you on Instagram, Twitter?
My name, Roy Wood Jr. Put an @ symbol in front of it. Put a .com behind it. That's every single platform except for Tumblr and Etsy, because I'm not creative enough.
The man knows how to market. Roy, thank you so much for being the co-host. We wish you nothing but health.
Hey, good time. Thank you all.
Andrea team, thank you so much for putting together another incredible Marketing for the Now. Maybe jump in here and tell everybody, you know, what our next one is, and more importantly for everybody, so I can get some context, please use the hashtag Marketing for the Now on your observation of this episode and put it on Twitter right now. I'm literally gonna let Andrea take us out, and before I go into my next meeting, I'm gonna read 2 or 3 minutes worth of feedback. So Marketing for the Now hashtag, please let me know what you thought about today. Andrea?
And check out any of our recorded episodes on VaynerX.com. Hashtag Marketing for the Now.